again at the source of the River Severn, in the Cambrian Mountains in the middle of Wales. In the previous programme, we saw how the river starts as a little trickle of water oozing out of this boggy mountainside. We saw how the Severn begins as a tiny stream. And we saw how it flows down the Welsh mountains and through Wales and England, to eventually reach the sea. Over the years, settlements have grown up along the River Severn, where people have chosen to live and work. Settlements grow up where they do for many different reasons. So let's start our journey down the river and see what we find. Nobody lives up here in the wooded slopes of the Hafren Forest in the Welsh foothills because it's too wild and inhospitable. The first place where people can live on the River Severn is further down the valley, on farms. This is the first farm on the Severn, and it's home of the Jones family. I talked to 15-year-old Dylan Jones. Can you tell me a bit about your farm?
Yes, well, we own about 500 acres both sides of the river, and the farm buildings are over there and the farmhouse. The cattle are kept in the buildings during the winter months.
How are you affected by the fact that you're farming in a valley?
Well, the valley floor is the flattest bit, and it means we have to grow all the crops nearly on the valley floor because it's far too steep to get machinery on the sides here.
So where does the river flow through the landscape?
Well, it comes down through the valley in the forestry, then it follows the like band of trees all the way down and past there.
What use do you make of the river on the farm?
The stock use it for summer, well, for drinking out of, and that's all really what we use it for the river.
What do you like about living here?
Well, it's very peaceful, and there's always lots to do with the farm, working with the machinery and the stock, but it does get a bit boring sometimes.
So it's goodbye to the first farm on the River Severn, home to 6 people and nestling in the bottom of the river valley. Continuing down the river, lined with trees, we next pass several small villages. Here, other rivers, tributaries, join the Severn. Where these rivers join is the first bit of flat ground where people could build a town by the river. This is Llanidloes, the first town on the River Severn. Llanidloes is a market town, a place where people come from the surrounding area to do their shopping and other business. Llanidloes is not much more than 4 roads that meet in the town centre. This is the old wooden market hall, and this is the wide main street. And there are shops and offices, pubs and houses. It was also a handy place to build a bridge over the river. Towns often grow up at places where bridges can be built across a river. What do the people here like about living in Llanidloes?
I like it in Llanidloes because it's safe and you can go downtown anywhere.
It's a safe area for, it's safe to bring up children. Like everybody knows each other.
It's the community, really. It's the scale of it. It's a very nice little town.
Is there anything that you dislike about living here?
Probably trying to get to outlying areas. If you want to go shopping and things like that, it's quite a long distance to the nearest large town.
I don't think there's anything I do dislike about it, actually. It's a beautiful place to live.
So it's goodbye to Llanidloes, the first town on the River Severn. Home to 3,000 people and where a bridge crosses the river. The river continues towards the northeast. Moving on along the River Severn, as the valley floor gets wider, there are more towns by the river. This is Welshpool. This area of open countryside doesn't look very special, but it is. We're approaching the border between Wales and England.
This embankment doesn't look much now, but it marks the old boundary between the two countries. It was built at the end of the 8th century by King Offa of Mercia, which was the name of this part of England then, to keep out the Welsh. It's called Offa's Dyke and runs for nearly 200 miles from south to north.
When it was built, Offa's Dyke was 20 feet high with a great ditch in front. Now it's just a raised ridge crossing the fields. This is the route of Offa's Dyke. It's very close to the present border between Wales and England.
Just here, the present-day border between Wales and England runs right down the middle of the River Severn.
Rivers often make useful borders between countries.
This side of the bridge I'm in Wales, and this side of the bridge I'm in England.
The River Severn is now flowing eastwards into England, and the first major town we come to is Shrewsbury. Shrewsbury is built on a hill with a great loop of the River Severn going right round it.
This is the middle of Shrewsbury on top of its hill. These are the modern high street shops, but just down this alleyway is the old town centre. This is the site of a Saxon church, over 1,000 years old. And here are the Tudor inns and shops, around 500 years old. And these are grand Georgian houses, 250 years old. And this is the old castle that guards the town.
Shrewsbury Castle guarded the narrow entrance to the town centre from the land, while the surrounding loop of the river protected the rest of the town from attack. Shrewsbury's been on this site for a long time. Shrewsbury is now a large modern town, but nothing is built near the river. This is because the flat land alongside the river is the floodplain, and it floods every time the river overflows. And that's something it does every few years, covering the riverside footpaths and gardens. It happens in the winter when there's a lot of rain up in the Welsh mountains. It would be silly to build anything too close to this. For the rest of the year, when the river is at its normal level, the people of Shrewsbury have lots of green open spaces near the town centre that they can enjoy. On one weekend in spring, something special happens on these riverside fields. Right on the banks of the River Severn is the annual Shropshire and West Midlands Show. Farmers from miles around bring their animals here to compete for prizes. And farmers' sons.
demonstrated by Demo Dave, as he's known.
It's also a chance to show off some of the latest farm machinery. And some of the earliest.
Industry as well. Came out to this country at about the time...
In winter, this field will be several feet underwater.
Makes the job look oh so easy, but I can assure you it takes a lot of learning. Many years of...
The countryside around Shrewsbury is an important farming area. And this is a chance for the sheep shearers to show off.
Around the tail and out she goes.
It's all the fun of the fair for the people of Shrewsbury. What do you like about Shrewsbury?
Historically, it's an interesting place.
Well, it's a nice town. It's got nice flowers and stuff in, and there's a good atmosphere about the place. It's not so like cities with high flats and stuff. It's pretty nice, really.
What do you think of the river?
Sometimes flood's pretty awful.
So it's goodbye to Shrewsbury, an historic town home to 60,000 people and built in a loop of the river. A few miles further on, there was once an even older town by the river. This field of ruined buildings is all that remains here now. But in Roman times, this was the thriving town of Viroconium, the fourth largest Roman town in Britain. This is all that's left today.
There were houses and public baths, barracks for soldiers and a great column temple, all surrounded by a wall.
The town of Viroconium was built here because this was where the Romans could cross the River Severn. That's the actual crossing place.
You can just imagine the Roman legions marching down here across the river on their way to Wales.
A few miles further on, there's another historic settlement. Here, the River Severn cuts its way through a narrow valley, or gorge. As the river flowed through the valley, it eroded the banks, causing rocks and stones to fall into the river from the valley sides. This erosion also revealed something else buried in the banks. Coal, clay, and iron ore. And that's why the town of Ironbridge grew up in this valley around 300 years ago. Ironbridge became the first industrial town in Britain. Houses and factories spread up the steep-sided river valley. Ironbridge is now preserved as a museum town, but 300 years ago, these were the workers' houses. And this valley was full of factories. It must have been a dreadful place to live in those days. In the factories, they used the coal and iron ore from the ground to make molten iron. Iron they used to make many new things, like railway wheels and rails. They used water from the river to drive the machinery. One of the amazing things they made here from iron was this bridge, opened in 1781. And here it is today, still crossing the River Severn. The Iron Bridge at Ironbridge is one of the most famous bridges in the world. Until that time, bridges had been made of stone or wood. This model shows how they also used the river to transport what they'd made in the factories, using hundreds of sailing boats. So that's Ironbridge, the birthplace of industry, with its iron bridge spanning a narrow gorge. The River Severn now turns southwards and its valley gets wider. The towns and cities along it get bigger too. This is Worcester, and like many places on the river, it grew up here because it was a good site to build a settlement and to cross the river. The next big settlement on the Severn is Gloucester. Gloucester is the biggest city on the River Severn and the nearest to the sea. It's been here a long time.
This is the centre of Gloucester with its modern shops, but under my feet is something much older. These are the remains of the town the Romans built nearly 2,000 years ago. These are the actual walls that once surrounded the old Roman town. And this is what's left of the gatehouse that guarded the entrance to the town from the east. Back above ground, this is still called Eastgate, and here's Southgate, Westgate and Northgate. They all meet here at these crossroads, which is still the centre of town today, just as it was in Roman times.
The Romans built their town on the top of a low hill. It was set back from the river, so it didn't get flooded, but near enough to a handy place where they could cross it.
The Romans made a good choice because right up until the middle of this century, this was the lowest crossing point on the River Severn. There were no more bridges between here and the sea. As time passed, the town grew. The Normans built a great cathedral here. In Victorian times, these docks and warehouses were built for the trade in grain and timber that was carried on the Severn. But there's not much trade now, so the docks have been turned into this boat marina and the warehouses into museums, offices and shops.
And of course, we took Timmy up the pub.
So it's goodbye to Gloucester, the biggest city on the Severn, home to over 100,000 people and with a long history. And like all the places we visited, Gloucester grew up here because the River Severn passes by on its way to the sea.